Foster Care Nation, listen up. This is
Foster Care and Unparalleled Journey.
Strength for the powerless, courage for the fearful, hope and healing for wounded hearts. Hi, and welcome back to Foster Care, an Unparalleled Journey with Jason.
And Amanda.
Today we have some special guests with us. We have Darren and Margie Fink. They have a group that a guy recommended to me to find, and they called it Transfiguring Adoption. I thought, what a strange name. I wonder what that means. And so I had a few buttons on the keyboard until I ran across this guy, Darren, and he said, yeah, let me call you, because turns out he's one of those weird guys like me who likes to talk and not type. And that was amazing. And so I talked to Darren, and he told me the story, and I want him to tell you guys the story today. Because Darren and Margie are a foster and adoptive family who do way more than just foster and adopt kids. They are leading the charge in helping people who are on that journey with us. How are you doing today, guys?
Doing all right.
Doing fantastic, actually.
Well, that's great. Do me a favor. Tell me, how did you guys get started in this journey? Because we all have a story. And most people's story is different, and very few people ever get to hear the real backstory. So how did you guys get into this?
So we, as far as getting into foster care and adoption, Margie and I couldn't have children of our own. I guess that's a continuing thing. We can't have children of our own. So for us though, like we've heard a lot of different couples that deal with infertility and different issues, and they're having to go through a grieving process. For us, I don't think there was ever much of a grieving process. I mean, I think there was, but for us, it was just kind of, we'd always talked about doing foster care or adoption, even before we were married. So this just kind of was like, oh, this is the next phase of our life now. We're going to do foster care because we're not going to have our own children. So it I don't know if I would say it was a relief, but it was just kind of okay, this door is closed on this journey, and now we're going to go on to the next one. So we started taking classes to get our licensing after we found that out. And that was the licensing classes were a journey. That was a lot of hours that we had to put in, a lot of things that we had to learn. And then before we even had our licensing, we got a phone call. You got to keep in mind, we were living in Southern Illinois at the time, and we were remodeling, gutting a 1913 home. And so the main floor was completely finished, except for the kitchen. The second floor, where the kids' bedrooms would be, completely down to the studs. And we got a phone call from our agency that we were licensing with, and they asked us, hey, can you guys take an emergency placement? And our response was, well, we don't even have our license yet. And they said, well, expedite it. So we pretty much were done with the classes at that point. So they were kind of like, well, we'll just expedite it. We're like, well, we don't have any bedrooms.
We had our room, and then there was another room on the main floor. But there were two siblings of opposite genders, and they weren't supposed to share a room. And we're like, well, how does that work? We don't have a place for them, and we can't really go to work and then come home and be drywalling and be mommy and daddy at the same time. So we kind of said no.
Well, not kind of. We did say no.
We did say no.
We told the
phone call number 3, when our worker said, okay, present foster family said they could hang in there for 3 weeks if you can, just do a barn raising and get those rooms ready. And so we did. I think the thing that got us was they said, we're going to separate them. We have no other option at this point. They had looked the entire region of Southern Illinois, multiple counties. There was nobody that could take the two kids together. And so that pulled at us. We didn't want to see the kids separated. So we said, okay, we will call every contractor friend we know. We will get it done. And 3 weeks later, here we were getting ready, and the day of, we took off of work, and it was kind of a memorable day because our beloved cat decided that he wanted to become crazy ill and need to be taken to the vet. So Darren leaves, and I'm a nervous wreck, and the caseworker comes and she drops the kids with like half their stuff and says, "Hey, I gotta go. I'll see you later." And we didn't know the kid's last name, social security numbers, or anything, like birth dates. And we're trying to ask the 5-year-old, the 22-month-old's middle name. So we're like, we got to put these kids in daycare. We know nothing about them. And that was our introduction to foster care.
That sounds like about an average introduction into foster care almost.
Pretty much.
It was a trial by fire. It was fun.
Yeah.
It's almost like the system is set up to throw us into it that way. But
yes.
It's like a hazing, right? Like
almost. Yeah, we weren't quite at that level, but we had an interesting step in ourselves. And so, I know that you said that you guys took 2 kids into a place that you didn't think was ready for them because you wanted to avoid the separation. Now, for the listeners, why is that such an important thing for you?
At the time, we both each have a sibling, and, growing up, my sibling was very important to me, and a few years back, I was actually, in DC with some different folks working on the national ad campaign for foster care. And that year, the focus was on siblings and keeping siblings together. And one of the things they said that really made a big impact was, that your sibling relationship is the longest relationship you will have in your entire life, because your parents, are older and they usually pass before you and you have some time after them. Spouses, friends, they come later, but your siblings are generally kind of on the whole life journey with you. So it's really an important relationship. And I just couldn't imagine, when foster care just is traumatic, to be as an adult, to think what would it feel like to someone just randomly come into your home, take you and say, okay, this is your new family. This is your new work. This is your new place. You don't know anybody. Everything and everyone that you know is gone. Your siblings, though, if you can go with them, that is huge, and just really important. So, we had a big home that we were renovating. And that was one of the things when we first went into it, was one of our purposes. We wanted to be able to keep siblings together. And, when we started it, we thought it was going to be, we're going to keep a bigger sibling group together, because we had a 3,300 square foot house that eventually, once it was all finished, had 6 bedrooms. So our thought was, we'll keep a big sibling set together. And we ended up keeping 2 kids together. So, and then they were shortly followed by a pre-adoptive placement of 9 and 10-year-old siblings from a different sibling set. So we went 0 to 4 in about 6 months. We started visits almost like 2 months after the first 2 kiddos came with the second set of kiddos. So from November of 2008, when the first 2 came, and then in January, we started doing visits. And then in June of 2009, the other 2 moved in 0 to 4 in 6 months, trial by fire.
That sounds like it. It sounds like we have a similar home. Our place was built in 1900-something. 1903. 03? Okay, yeah. I couldn't remember exactly how long ago it's been, but I know it's over 100 years old. And the upstairs could really use a remodel if you guys want to come on out and take care of that.
I would let you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, not really, because I'm not a construction guy. I need to make some good friends. Anybody out there in the construction industry that wants a good friend? Come on by. Yeah. So keeping those siblings together, I understand the importance of that. We actually have a sibling group of 2 that we've adopted as well. And that's been an interesting thing for us to watch on our journey, the importance of keeping those kids together.
Well, the bond, bond that they have, the journey that they've been together on, and to separate that is just not something that is right to do.
Yeah. Our second sibling set that we got, they were 2 out of 4. And I remember right around the week that our 2 moved in, their siblings, because rights had actually been terminated that week. They had been in care 5 years. Rights were terminated the week that they moved into our home. And so their siblings' family was also a foster family. They were military. They were waiting for that termination so they could move out of state. So that same week, their siblings moved out of state. And so it was probably what, like a year later, they came back to visit, and we were trying to do catch up time because, they were still in care. So they were still supposed to be getting those sibling hours. They're supposed to be getting hours with their, birth parents, but they're also supposed to be getting hours with their siblings. And that wasn't happening because they lived several states away. And I just remember the kids getting out of the van, and our two and the other two coming together, and Darren and I just having to really fight, just losing it on the sidewalk, because it was like you could see there were pieces of them coming together that had been for years separated, because they, by that point, about 6 years in care, and they hadn't lived together for 6 years. And it was it's truly sad, and we do our best to keep them in contact, but it's all these years they're missing out on together.
And I think it goes back even, I think even with that, with siblings, keeping them together, it, like Margie's hitting on, it has to do with their identity. So it's one of those topics almost that like I'll talk to folks that are fostering or that have recently adopted, and maybe they've adopted a toddler, an infant that's pre-verbal. And you're not necessarily seeing things right now, but later on, you'll start to see them wondering about their identity, wondering where they came from, what kind of family. All those questions are going to start to surface when they start to be able to look at themselves and wonder more about who they are and their purpose in life and stuff like that, kind of more the abstract questions. But being able to keep the siblings together, that's going to help with the identity. I can see with our kiddos that are being able to be kept together. And another thing I'll throw out too is I know that our oldest son, even with having a cognitive disability, has mentioned before that he has felt guilt with his siblings being taken from the home, thinking that he might have been the cause of it, or different things like that. So that just to say that we don't know what's going through our kids' heads either when siblings are separated or kept together. So if a sibling group has to be separated, we're also telling the kids that this whole situation with them being taken out of a birth home is not their fault. But if they're being moved from home to home to home to home, and they're constantly being told, this is not your fault, this has nothing to do with you. Yeah, well, the adults aren't moving around. I'm moving around, so I'm the common denominator. It must be my fault. Well, the same thing with a sibling set being separated. We can tell them that it's not their fault, but that doesn't stop them from taking that on themselves and thinking, this is my fault. My brother or my sister are not with me because something I did. So yeah, like, I mean, hugely important to keep the siblings together. I mean, and if we're talking fostering, I mean, that's why we're fostering to begin with, is to help a family stay together.
It sounds like you guys have got quite a history in this. I think the years you mentioned takes us back, a dozen years or more?
Mm-hmm.
It does.
We started in 2008.
Okay, so you've been doing it for 12 years. So it sounds like you guys have a lot of experience and a lot of time involved. I assume you've built a decent community around you of foster and adoptive parents as well.
We have. We've also made 2 interstate moves that one was incredibly unexpected. Right when all the adoptions were finalized in 2012, and we thought, we were still kind of fostering, doing some respite and stuff, but we kind of thought, this is for Darren's mantra was 4 is enough. So we had others like I said that were with us a lot for respite, but as far as the long term, we kind of felt settled and everybody was kind of getting in their groove, and we thought, this will be the first time our kiddos can stay in the same school and for multiple years in a row and have the same friends. And Darren lost his job, and they ended up moving to Tennessee. So it took a while to rebuild, and then we just moved to Florida in 2018. So we're still working on rebuilding that a little bit, but we have a lot more, especially because we kind of have built up a virtual network. So we have a lot of folks who are connected to virtually. But that's been very important throughout our journey. And actually, around 2010, we started a support group in Southern Illinois. And because we saw the need, and people were driving sometimes 2 hours one way to get to that support group, because there was just such a need for community, for someone else who, a lot of times foster parents don't even need you to fix their problem. They just need you to listen and to know, hey, I'm not the only one in this, and I'm not crazy. Sometimes, they just need to hear that. So,
no, I know. Seriously, I could almost hear like 50 foster parents listening to this. We're like, yeah, what she said, like, because it's such a big thing that they just want to hear that they're not crazy. And the virtual resources that we've created have been huge. And what year was it that we started the support group, did you say?
It was about 2010, I think. 2009, 2010.
2009, 2010. And there's still a remnant of it going on today, even though that we don't live there, which is showing just, I think when Margie originally set out to create that support group, again, it showed just how much of a need there was, that it's still happening, even though she has no presence in it today.
Wow, that's pretty incredible that it's lasted that long, for sure. Darren and I talked a little bit ahead of all this, so I know a little bit of the backstory here. But what I think was an amazing part of the story is where you told me about coming back from vacation and having a voicemail, I think it was, right?
Yeah. So after when we moved to Tennessee, we started to explore reading with the kids, because our kids have been moved around from home to home so many years in foster care. There were just things like reading and different things like that. I think a lot of people can relate with that. There are just simple things, simple experiences that our kids had never had. Being read to was one of them, and getting interested in reading was one of them. So the kids we're going to be going to Universal Studios. The kids wanted to watch all the Harry Potter movies. So they'd already seen them. So we kind of said, okay, through different foster homes and different places, you guys have already seen these movies. We're going to read through the books. We'll do a chapter at dinner time each night. So we break out the first book. We started reading. And our 12-year-old son at the time broke down crying after the first chapter, which is a big thing for a 12-year-old boy to do in front of a lot of other people. It's kind of the macho factor. And for him also, he has a lot of trouble with dissociation and realizing what emotions he's even having. He also has almost like aphasia, where he has trouble recalling words. So communicating his feelings and emotions is a hard thing for him to do. So for him to be crying and understand what's going on at the dinner table is a huge thing for us. You have to understand. So we kind of ask him, what's happening, and he relays all this past stuff. And the reason he could do all that is he said, I get how the characters in the book are feeling, and could point out how he felt about different things. So we really found out that day, we're like, wow, there's something to this. This book is giving him a voice. It's helping him to communicate. And we didn't expect it to happen. It's not like we were sitting down to teach a lesson or anything like that. We were simply just sitting down to read a stinking book together and have fun.
We weren't doing trauma therapy or anything. We're just reading together, having bonding, having a shared experience.
It really creeped up on us. So the kids got excited about it, actually, because they had great conversation with us. And they said, Margie and I were helping out with a social media management company at the time. And they said, hey, can we write a blog about this and tell other foster and adoptive families what they need to connect with this first book with Harry Potter? Yeah, fine. Let's start a family blog. So we start it, and we go on vacation a few weeks later, maybe 2-3 weeks later. And while we're on vacation, it was kind of weird. Ran into a few people that we didn't know, just making chit chat at the parks. And someone said, hey, we follow you guys on your blog. Really? They show me their smartphones. Sure enough, they're following us on Instagram. That's weird, because we're really not doing anything with this thing to make it known. So it's weird that, how did you guys know about us? Didn't think anything, just thought it was neat. Head home, and when we get home, we had a voicemail from the Knoxville, Tennessee newspaper saying, hey, we want to do a news story on your blog. Huh. Again, we're not marketing it, it's just a fun thing we're doing for our kids. So we started looking at it. We're like, we seem to be hitting something here. Changed the name because the kids called the blog Hogwarts Adoption. So we're like, wow, there's a lawsuit waiting to happen. So we changed it to Transfiguring Adoption. And then fast forward years later, we do very little with Harry Potter. It's now a nonprofit. And we seek our niches. We try to find ways to resource and help parents so that we can nurture foster and adoptive kiddos or any kid from a traumatic background.
Well, that's quite the road to helping kids through Harry Potter.
Yes. Well, and it was kind of something, we noticed along the way, there were a lot of times that we were able to connect to our kids or to convey something to them, and then for them to share back to us through reading, watching movies, listening to music. There were ways we were able to communicate and share with them and express an idea that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So we found that there was just so much power in that media. And it's a non-judgmental, we're not sitting down to talk about, hey, what are our issues? What problems are we having? But we can talk about a character and say, hey, notice they struggled with such and such, and they did this. How do you think that worked? Or do you ever feel that way? And, it's a safe environment to be able to talk about things. And it's just kind of fun the way things come up. I even at one point we were watching Extreme Hoarders.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the story. I'm glad you're sharing it.
It was just this crazy moment of like, oh no, what are we doing? Because we were watching Extreme Hoarders, and it just happens to be this episode where CPS comes in and takes the kids out of the home. And we were like, oh, wow, talk about trauma triggers, and maybe we shouldn't have been watching this, and what do we do? But it was the craziest. It ended up being a really good thing because the kids kind of saw the process, because when they were small, they just know someone shows up at the door and takes them away, or shows up at school and takes them from the school. But they didn't kind of know what led up to that, then kind of what those steps were. And, we're just sitting in the car, and they said, hey, so who made the call for us? And how did this, and they started asking questions about how it all happened. And really for us, for all of our kids, we were placement 5 or 7. For the ones who are adopted. For some of the others that were in our house, it was like, we were at placement 8, and at that point you don't know what happened in the beginning, but we were able to kind of take what we did know and say, this is what we do know, this is what we don't know, and this is kind of what maybe did happen or didn't happen, and able to, it led to several conversations over a few weeks. And it was something that helped them kind of process and work through some some thoughts and process their past in a healthy way that wouldn't have come up otherwise. So it was just, there's some neat things that can happen just in those everyday moments as we connect with our kids.
Well, and communication is key.
Mm-hmm.
You have to connect with your kids, and it sounds like you guys are doing that, and you're doing it in different ways. And we have found in our journey that, every kid is different, and every kid connects differently, and different things will bring up different issues and different triggers. And, one kid learns this way, another kid is, they verbal, and, it's just, it's crazy. But through this journey, it's taught us that we have to change the way we think so much. It sounds like you guys are doing that, and that's really awesome. And it sounds like you're helping other people do that. So why is that so important to you guys?
I think it's so important because it's necessary. We have the statistic that we throw out a lot that there's 50% of foster parents or newly licensed foster parents are going to quit this year in the States because they don't feel like they can handle the trauma that a child's bringing into their home. And what that's going to do is it's going to compound everything, because again, like I was talking about earlier, you have a child that Margie was just even saying it too, like you have a child that's coming into foster care or even an adoption situation. They're not sure maybe what all has got them there. They just know that they're there in the situation right now. And maybe even the caregiver doesn't even understand everything completely. And then if there's a disruption, and you have the child move to a new home, you have people around them telling them, this isn't your fault, it's not your fault. But of course, if I'm in their situation, I'm thinking this is totally my fault because that family's not moving to a new home. I'm moving to a new home, and I'm not with my birth family anymore. So you have children that are having compounded trauma, and just everything's getting more complicated. So the more it's important for us to be able to help parents, educate them, and show them how they can be empowered to use media or different ways to communicate with kids, because we got to empower parents to show them therapeutically how to handle these situations when they come along, so that we can lower that disruption rate, and help kids hopefully kids will go back to their birth home. So hopefully we're helping them in that situation, and we're getting them ready to go back home to where mom and dad are in a healthier place. But if they can't go back home, we have to help. This is a dark time for these kids, for the whole family. It's a dark time. And so we have to be able to help those families figure out how to cope and process that. And that's going to take a different way of thinking, like you're talking about. Like, it's not going to take the same parenting that we know about.
Well, I know for us too, I think in the beginning, we really floundered for a while. We felt unprepared, ill-prepared, ill-equipped, and there are things that we learned along the way that were like, oh, we wish we would have known that, 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And maybe things would have turned out even a little better than they have. So I think that's been always important to us, is just kind of helping others along this journey. And I think even our kids, there have been times when we have felt like, maybe we need to just kind of focus on our family, and, it's rough running a nonprofit and still paying the bills and, and taking care of your own family and everything. So there have been days where like, oh, I know, maybe we should just, stick to doing our family stuff. And, our kids will say, oh no, we want to help other people, and we, put in our work too. We wrote these blogs, and we did these videos, and we did this stuff, and we want to help other families, and we want other kids to be able to heal and reach their potential and stuff.
And I'll throw a plug in for our kids too, because when we started this, it was a family deal. So like everything that we did involved our family. It's become less and less that as it's become a nonprofit, simply because we're trying to protect our kids as we're getting more exposure. And we just don't want them there. I mean, there's a political side to, like with any situation, there's a political, there are agendas, there are things within the foster care and adoptive community, and people take offense at certain things, or they get excited about certain things, whatever. We're trying to guard our kids from that as much as possible. But they, like Margie said, they're fantastic. They see the work that our nonprofit's doing, the services that we offer, and they're just constantly giving their input. If nothing else, they're always like telling Margie and I that we have to keep those days where you have those rough days where you just want to give up on everything. They're telling us, you guys can't do this. There are other families that need help. We got to keep so I got to give kudos to our kids. They really do a great job with all this.
It sounds like you've taken a different approach to it than maybe I have. I'm ready to be like the old curmudgeonly guy who's these young kids and all this dang technology. When I was growing up, we had one toy to play with, and it was called dirt, But as parents, we're really actively watching the amount of technology these kids are getting. I mean, like we were talking before we started here, we're sitting here in front of computer screens trying to do the virtual schooling with a kindergartner and a first grader day. And they're awfully young to be doing this. And we know that this is going to spark that desire for more technology going forward. And I can see lots of dangers in that technology. We talked to, I think her name was Becca Dominguez from bark.us. And she talks about some of the dangers that they work to avoid for these kids. But at the same time, you guys have really kind of taken and embraced this technology as a way to help kids and families work through this. And I think that's an amazing way to look at it, that it doesn't have to all be bad. And you guys have done an amazing job of finding a way to make this helpful for kids and families.
Well, and I think we're kind of with you in a way, because I feel like if we could just take our kids back to Tinker Toys and dirt, I think we're like, yes, win. But it's the unfortunate nature of our society that there's no way that we're going to be able to, like, our kids are going to have to know how to use email. They're going to have to know how to use, even if they don't have a Facebook account, they've got to know the gist and how it works just to even get engaged with conversation around the water cooler at work. And so we somehow, and people are seeing movies more than ever because of the COVID pandemic. So they have to know about these things. And I think that's somewhat of our thought process that we've got. It's stuff that people are using anyways. So we're trying to utilize what people are using and what our kids need to learn how to use. It's funny because we even
trying to help the parents know, because as parents, we can't look at every piece of media. We can't see every video game. And for our kids, what we're looking at as caregivers isn't necessarily like what the typical parent might be looking at. If a movie comes out and it's reviewed on some other sites, like Common Sense Media, and they might be counting how many swear words there are and how many times someone kisses, or getting into some of these nitty gritty. But maybe, your 4-year-old that comes into foster care knows every swear word there is in the book. And that's maybe not what that's not maybe what you're, what you're looking for. You're looking for, what are the trauma triggers? What are the things that we need to know as caregivers? Teens are wanting to play video games. What's in the video game? Do they have access to other people through the video game? Is there a way that I can stop them if so, I so need to? Those kinds of things, we're trying to empower parents with that information that maybe they wouldn't be able to find elsewhere, because it's a little bit of a different journey.
It makes parents less anxious. And like Margie said, that's the reason I feel like it empowers, is because it might be stuff that you're not familiar with, but it helps you to become familiar. So what Margie's talking about is, so probably November 2019, we had already been, because of the Harry Potter blog that our family started, we'd always been reviewing books and kind of taking a look at books for our nonprofit. We kind of upped the game though, where we have reviewers now, that the reviewers are either former foster youth or adult adoptees. They might be therapists, they have a way to look at things through a trauma lens. They're looking at books. They're looking at video games. They're looking at the movies. When movies were coming out in theaters, now they're looking at movies that are coming out on streaming platforms. But looking at those through a trauma lens and helping a parent to see all the things that Margie was just talking about. And the reviewers come out with new ones every month, and then we have a whole database full of it. And it is amazing because there are things that they're bringing out, like as a new foster parent or even a new adoptive parent, I didn't know that our bodies can't differentiate between good adrenaline and bad adrenaline. So when you are being physically abused, your fight, flight, or freeze situation, you have some adrenaline that is telling you, got to get out of here, got to survive. On Christmas morning, when you can't wait to open presents, you have the same chemicals given off. But your body doesn't say, this is a good situation, this is a bad situation. No, the chemicals are just given and you get excited. During Christmas time, or doing a movie, let's say like the new Marvel movies, where you're on the edge of your seat and there are the fight scenes and you have adrenaline pumping through you, your body just starts to remember, hey, I remember this adrenaline rush. Remember, we were getting hit or, burned by a cigarette during this time. And then your body just subconsciously has this response of, I'm in danger, I need to get out, I need to do something. But you're sitting in a movie theater having fun with your family, or you're opening presents on Christmas morning. But subconsciously, their bodies are telling them that. And so that's where a lot of parents will see sabotage of holidays, meltdowns, different things happen. But our reviewers for the movies and different things are able to pull that out and say, hey, if you're going to go to the movie theater with your child, or if you're going to drop $60 on this new video game, you might want to know about this, because instead of spending the money here, if it's going to be an issue, maybe you should spend it over on another situation that might be a little bit healthier, and you guys will get more out of it. So I think it's vital for families to know this stuff.
where could people go to find your reviews? Because that sounds like quite the resource to have. Because I know there was a TV show that came out a while back that people in the foster care and adoptive community really talked a lot about. I never took the time to sit down and watch it. The what was that called?
Oh, I don't even remember. It was a cartoon.
The Willoughbys, maybe?
The Willoughbys. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, we reviewed that one. It was, our reviewer had an interesting time with that one.
I can imagine. There was a lot of groups that were talking about it, and it was really negative, and we didn't even check it out, and our kids didn't watch it, so it wasn't an issue. But like Jason said, where can parents go to find stuff like that? Because I know as a parent, we're always looking for that.
Absolutely. So if you go to our website is transfiguringadoption.com. You're going to put a /subscribe, transfiguringadoption.com /subscribe. And it's a media review service. You can choose $5 a month for our standard plan or $12 a month for our premium plan. That helps us to pay our reviewers.
Without that, there is a free tier. You're leaving out the
Right.
free tier. The free tier, you get access to searchable media lists. You can go into book lists. You can find resources for the grown-ups, but you can find books, movies, video games for the kiddos, and you can put in, like with the books, you can put in a topic, and you can find, it'll pull up books that have to do with that topic. You can put in an age range. It's all searchable. And you're going to see, if we've reviewed it, there's a rating system, 0 to 5 hoots, because you see the owl behind Darren there. That's our logo. So our hoot system is based not on is this a great literary work? It's based on how useful is this to a foster or adoptive family? And it's all explained on the website. But in the free tier, you can see that and you can see just kind of the synopsis, some basic information. In the standard tier, you get trauma triggers, you get cautionary points, and you get discussion points, like maybe what are some good discussions that you can have from this media. And then the premium plan is going to include all of that. Plus you get discussion/activity guides. So the reviewers go through and they give you questions that you can ask your kids, and then kind of break down, why would you ask that? What are you getting at? And a little bit more information, or some activities. They might be sensory activities. They might be just bonding activities, something to do with the movie. And in all of it, the kids are they're connecting with you. They're able to talk about issues without ever having to say, hey, I'm dealing with this.
Mm-hmm. And it's everything you need to, right? It's almost like the dummies books. Like when you go, you don't want to know, you want to know about a subject and you go to buy whatever for dummies. Like this, literally for me, I'm an art major. Margie's a psychology major. I have intro to psychology type certification. But this for me helps me because I don't even have to play the video game with my kids. I can literally read through the review, and the reviewer says everything for me, has the questions. So I don't have to, if I didn't have time to play the game with my kiddo, I can literally go through the questions. It explains everything. So just a week after them playing, I can say, hey, so what about this? What's going on with blah, blah, blah? How do you feel about that? And they're kind of surprised that I realize anything about the storyline, to be honest, because I think that I couldn't care less because I'm not watching them play the game. So even right there, I get brownie points because I'm connecting with them, right? So definitely, like Margie said, we were talking, go to transfiguringadoption.com /subscribe. There's a sample review on there for Toy Story 2 or 4. I don't remember which offhand, that people can download. And if you're not wanting to jump in and pay anything, we have a coupon code that we give folks called, it's first free, the number 1, capital STFREE, first free. And that'll give you the first month free. So you can just kind of jump in there and try everything. And we don't access to the whole database. You can just start downloading stuff and figure it all out if you want to. We really just want to help parents, and we're just trying to cover the cost of our reviewers. So we totally get people are going to go in there and download everything and then bail before, and we're totally fine with that. If it helps you with your kids and helps to empower you, that's what we want.
Oh yeah. And I totally get the cost of things because we have a Patreon account as well, because the sole sponsor of this particular podcast, well, he's a guy that looks a lot like this fellow right here talking. And there's costs associated with it. And there's a lot of time involved as well and things. And I can only imagine the amount of time you guys have tied up taking care of the things that you have, because that sounds like an amazing opportunity to be able to reach into things that I have no clue about. There's Skyrim, there's Fortnite, there's Dark Souls. I think my older son, one of my older sons, he's 19, was talking about this morning. There's about 1,000 video games that they talk about. I really have no clue.
Yeah.
I don't have time to play video games. I don't know the storyline. I don't know the goal. I know that if I walk by, I can tell if it's a first-person shooter, and that's about it.
Right, exactly. And it's, it's hilarious too, is I'll share an interesting story is, so we have a bulk rate for this that we, like, an agency might want to get it for their foster families instead of each individual. So we have a bulk rate. We have an agency in Lubbock, Texas that has group homes and foster homes. They just bought a bunch of subscriptions at a lower rate, and they said, we're going to use this to train our group home staff, because they're watching videos and playing video games with the kids, but they don't, like, our staff aren't trained on trauma. They don't know how to interact with the kids, what they're seeing, what to watch for. So they're using it to train their staff. Well, it was interesting because the funny part is my manager of this project is talking with our contact over there. And she's like, hey, really appreciate you guys. Are we hitting everything? Do you guys need us to... And the contact over there is like, hey, we have a lot of kids playing this video game. We want you guys to review it. No problem. We'll review it. Anything else? Any movies? Yeah, the new Chucky movie just came out. Can you review that one? And we're like, whoa. Like, are you guys serious? Like, and because all of us, like our whole media review team, we're like, are they seriously going to show kids from trauma backgrounds Chucky? Like,
in the group home? Really?
In the group home? Like, and so, like, I had to stop and our project manager, Jen, she's amazing. She's like, okay, guys, stop. Let me explain. She's like, yes, they want you to review this, but not so that they can watch it. They have kids coming into their home that have already seen it. And so they have no clue what kids are freaking out about. They have no clue what happened in that movie. All they know is they're having issues because of this movie, and they don't know how to talk with them. And we're like, oh, so it's a powerful tool in that way too, with kids coming into your home. If there's something you don't want to watch or you don't want in your home for various reasons, it gives you those cliff notes and those warnings so you know how to still bond and connect with your kid, and help them work through something that you don't want to, like, you don't want to expose yourself to a Chucky movie or something like that. So that was one of our more interesting media reviewer meetings, though. It was trying to decide who is. I have a bunch of reviewers that are not horror and thriller people, so they were like, everyone was doing a not it for watching Chucky. So
yeah, Jason wouldn't watch it. He's not a horror fan at all.
I used to be, like, as a teen, and now I'm like, I don't. Even like the thriller suspense stuff, like, I don't want anything to do with it anymore. Maybe too much real life has happened.
Absolutely, yes.
I can totally see the value in that, because one of the things that we had happen when our kids were younger is our kids were staying with a family member who we didn't think would pull this one off, but we came home after an evening out to find out that our kids, how old were they? They were young,
goodness.
But they had sat
2
down,
and 3,
and had watched Scream.
Yeah.
We had a kiddo that came in at 4 who had seen Scream, and there were multiple night terrors and things involved with having been exposed to Scream at a young age.
yeah, several nights of scary man, mommy, scary man, and screaming, and I was like, oh my goodness, why would you expose a child to this? I mean, it never even crossed our minds to speak to this person and say, hey, this is not appropriate for this level of age, and you just don't think about the exposure that your child gets on a day-to-day basis when you're not around.
And I don't think people in the general public think about because again, what Margie was talking about, like I'll talk to folks that have asked us, hey, can I volunteer to be a reviewer? And I'll talk with them. And we've had one or two people that hadn't had any trauma experience, and we actually have to take them through a training process, because we found if they've never had experience with kids from trauma backgrounds or looking at things through a trauma lens, they're looking at like how many times the F-bomb was dropped. And we're like, okay, while I know a lot of people have opinions on a 3-year-old using the F-bomb, and I'm not condoning it, but I mean, if a child's already using it, they're looking at it as, how can we stop kids from being exposed to something? But I'm like, but they're already been exposed to it. They know they can use swear words better than you.
Do the main caregivers die in the first 3 minutes like they do in like most Disney movies? You know, like, is there some major loss, or are there, you know, we actually have a whole worksheet on, and it's in all of our review packets, on 10 major things to look for. And they're not things that people necessarily think of, but they're all things that kids coming from, you know, foster or adoptive experience have probably dealt with, that could be triggering, that wouldn't be triggering to the typical child.
And it's kind of like the Marvel movie, like with the adrenaline. It's stuff that you're not thinking of. Actually, now that Margie, I'm glad you brought that up, because when people, no matter what level you subscribe to, as long as you subscribe to the free level, the stand, whatever, they get a free download with we go through and we explain trauma triggers and how media can be used to help kids, and how also the triggers are going to remind them of their past and harm them. But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's parenting different. So you're really shifting and communicating different. You're looking at things different. You're not looking like the typical parent, where you're worried and concerned about having your child exposed to certain things because they've already been exposed to certain things. You're worried about re-exposing them or getting them reconnected with the trauma that they've already lived through. So it's just things like watching abuse of an animal or a parent, or is there substance abuse, or things like that, where even people like in a Roger Rabbit movie, where you're not thinking, they're drinking in that movie. Not all kids are going to be triggered by that. But if you grew up in a home with a physically abusive parent that was drunk all the time, Roger Rabbit doing a shot of whiskey might bother you.
You know, you mentioned that, and I remember in our classes that we took, one of the other potential foster parents was there as well, and they show a video, and they obviously don't show anything inappropriate, but in this particular video, the dad came into the little girl's bedroom and sat down on the bed beside her, and was you could tell just by the scene that it was something inappropriate. And one of the parents, one of the adults who was there to become a foster parent, suddenly stood up and she said, "Do I have to stay here?" And the worker said, "No." And so she turned around and walked out of the room for a while. And it just shows how those triggers can last for 20, 30 years later. And she's still triggered in the same moment by something that obviously was in her history and bothered her that much later. How much more does it affect a kid at 14, 15 years old as they're going through those developmental phases?
Right.
And when they often haven't been able to process it, or they don't, you know, some of it might have been pre-verbal, and sometimes they don't even remember it. They just, something, you know, there's the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And it, you know, it relates to those chemical reactions in the body, and they can be triggered and they don't even know why they're triggered.
Right.
Because something happened pre-verbally, or maybe it wasn't pre-verbal, but they just didn't have enough knowledge to kind of process through it, or no safe adults on duty to work with them. So,
and then you're seeing kids doing, I mean, to us, it looks weird, but for them, it's the only way. A 13-year-old falling down to the ground and just screaming, kicking their feet in a movie theater is the only, they don't know how to articulate their needs or what's happening to them. All they know is to panic and to go into that. And they just know that they feel threatened and they need to get out of that situation and they need help. To everyone else, it looks weird. There's a teenager on the floor flailing around. Are they having an attack? Is there something like medically wrong?
Or bad parenting.
Or bad parent. Like what? So there's a lot that goes on there. And our kids that don't know how to articulate themselves, they just need us to be on duty as different, seeing things differently and being able to anticipate things and being investigators ourselves. And that's why the reviews, it's, to me, gosh, to me, the reviews help it so much. Like I can think of times that I've used them myself with my kids, and I can think of, I'm glad we've avoided certain movies based on what reviewers have put out. And I'm so glad because we're an iTunes family. Like we personally, instead of we have a big family. So instead of going to the movie theater, we'd rather just spend the night at home, iTunes, and then I can pause if someone has a meltdown or someone gets chatty and so I don't miss the movie. But even then, I'm still spending like $15, $20 on a movie. And so if I know I'm going to have a negative experience with my family, when we would have meltdowns or have things that would happen with media, my mind just goes to, I could have spent $20 on this. We could have gone out to eat at I could have gotten all the kids McDonald's Happy Meals and it would have made their day. And we would have had all these fun laughing moments. But no, we bought this movie and now everyone's, in tears and they're having nightmares and we're having to deal with all this other junk. And it's just a horrible situation. I could have done this and had happy faces and fun and good memories, but no, here I am. So for me, even the reviewers putting this out and this knowledge is just amazingly important because it helps me to guard my finances so I can make sure my family's doing well and doing healthy things.
You mentioned the importance of this with foster kids and kids who've been through trauma, but even our older sons who were biological kids who did not come from a trauma background. I remember but the day that our oldest son stepped into his preteen years full-fledged because we had gone to the movie theater and watched Where the Wild Things Are. I don't know if you guys remember that movie. And on the way home, I thought it was an interesting movie because my psychology degree never happened. I'm just a amateur, I guess you would say.
You're in good company.
Yeah. So I enjoy that the conversation around psychology and how that affects people. And so I was talking with the kids as we're on the way home, and I asked them, I'm like, I can see these different monsters are all part of a personality and part of the brain. And so I was asking my kids, which one do you think is most like you? And when I got to my oldest son at that point, that was the first time he kind of balked at answering. And then he kind of had a little bit of a meltdown on me. And I was like, whoa, where did my cute little 8-year-old boy go? Because he wasn't 8 anymore. Right. 10 or 11, I'm going to say.
Something like that. Somewhere
in that age range. And suddenly something in that movie had really affected him. And I didn't realize it. And so we had this whole experience where suddenly he was really triggered by this, and it caused kind of a really negative dynamic for us. How much more is that true for a kid who hasn't had food security in their life, who hasn't been in a home all the time for their life, a kid who maybe lived on the streets? And, because it sounds a little bit out there to most people, but we have kids who've done that, to a kid who's been sexually abused, physically abused, or all of the above. Mm-hmm. We've seen that. So this is a really valuable resource for foster parents, adoptive parents, and to be honest, even parents in general, even with your own bio kids, because you don't know all the traumas that they have necessarily experienced, regardless of how much you want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we, I'll even say we have a reviewer that she has a stepdaughter, and just, she uses some of the reviews and alters them for a divorced family situation, and it still works out. So yeah, it definitely through our resources we've had daycare providers, not so much with the review service, I guess, but we've had other educators look at some of the questions and different things, and they're surprised with how much. Even though we're called Transfiguring Adoption and we're talking about foster care and adoption all the time, things that we're producing are easily translatable into what educators need at school to help kids that are coming from the home's going through a bad divorce or a messy divorce. Anything where there's just a lot of chronic trauma in that child's world, This is going to be able to be translated and used to help a child work through their feelings or articulate different things or avoid triggers with that. So it's, and I think that's, I mean, we're talking about the trauma triggers and how to avoid that stuff. I think the other one thing too, as educators point out a lot to me, are just the positive uses for it too, because they don't realize some of the healthy conversation thing like to talk about with kids that come from a trauma background. Like a lot of our kids in the foster care system or from adoption, they were never modeled how to make good, healthy relationships and friendships. And so as many times as we can see that modeled in a movie or a video game, we want to point that out to parents that, hey, this is what the character did to make healthy friendships. Let's talk about that. Are you doing that? Do you think it would help you in your life? Because our kids don't necessarily know how to make healthy friends or have healthy relationships, or we want to point out in a movie how someone's making bad choices for a friendship or a relationship so that our kids can see that and they can lock it away in their head later. I shouldn't do that because it ended bad for that character.
Yeah, that's a real amazing resource for all parents in general, because like I mentioned, kids have trauma, whether we know about it or not. So even if your kids haven't gone through the system, they're potentially at risk for that. Now, I've been sitting here taking notes this whole time, and Margie, I just noticed a note that I wrote down that I never went back. You mentioned something, you kind of just brushed over it, that at one point you were in DC working on a national campaign for foster care and adoption. What role did you play in Washington, D.C. with foster kids?
I've been able to go a few different times. One time I was able to go and speak on the adoption tax credit. And then the other time was to do some media training. So when they were setting up that national ad campaign, Adopt US Kids has, like kind of a speakers bureau nationally of adoptive families that they can call on for local or national, at whichever level that they're looking for someone. And so we were doing some kind of media trainings to kind of hone our messages. But they were bringing people in. It was really neat to meet. They had some former foster youth talking about that sibling separation and just doing some work on that aspect.
So you've been working with not only the kids and families, foster families, through your media and everything that you're doing for a lot of years and nationally as well. Mm-hmm. You guys are like rock stars in this world.
Far from it. We do what we can when we can.
Well, yeah, but so many people that I know are afraid to step out into something that's uncomfortable or unfamiliar territory. And it sounds like you guys are just willing to embrace life and step right into whatever challenge is set in front of you and just go for it.
Yeah, I think, again, it comes back to we just want to see kids succeed. Even with Transfiguring Adoption, the very first part of our tagline is we exist to nurture, foster, and adoptive kids. And it's, or any kid from a trauma background. We just want to see, we can see that something's not right. We can see that, and we're not throwing blame on people, but I think anyone can see that the system isn't necessarily working the way it should or the way it could fully work right now. And we just want to see that it's helped so that we can help as many kids possible.
Well, that's a great reason to work towards it, because at the end of the day, I say this a lot, but at the end of the day, who's going to be taking care of our pension funds, our retirement plans, our health care decisions? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we really want to have those kids in good shape so that when we get there,
absolutely. And it's true. Like we'll tell. I'll tell a lot of folks too, because we do. We do think outside the box a little bit, because we've been contacted by comic conventions over the years to go to talk, because with our Harry Potter discussion guide, a lot of fans of that series want to hear how they can help kids and give meaning to their fandom. But there are a lot of folks that will come across that they just, it's not heartless. That just helping children is not their goal in life. But I'll tell them, I'm like, look, you guys, that's fine. But the stats are showing me, they're pretty bleak for kids aging out of the system. We can either help and take the time to help these kids now. And that doesn't mean that you need to become a foster parent, but you need to support foster parents. You need to do things like help Transfiguring Adoption or other great nonprofits out there that are helping families. You need to help them now, because if you don't, later we're going to spend more time, energy, and money
for the rest of the kids' lives when they're incarcerated or on welfare or different things, because they haven't gotten the support and the things that they need now.
Right. So we can either make sure that they become successful adults now, or we can just be taking care of them for the rest of their lives. And I think it's a no-brainer which one to choose. And then when you're involved with it, like a lot of the folks here that are listening and you guys, we're seeing these kids firsthand, and you see the potential in them, and you don't want them to fall on their face. You want them to fly. You want them to succeed. And you're just looking at them and you're thinking, I could do something about it right now. So I need to do something. I can't just sit and dream about it or hope that someone else does it. I need to, and again, it doesn't have to be becoming a foster parent. It might mean just doing something small. Like if you know a foster family or an adoptive family, order a pizza, for goodness sakes, for that night for them, just so that they don't have to cook that night. And at the very least, those parents are able to sit down with the kids and talk with them, or they're able to maybe go into their bedroom, shut the door for 5 minutes, or however long it would have taken them to make a meal, longer than 5 minutes, and just take a breather and not worry about things, so that they mentally can prepare themselves for handling trauma behaviors or working with kids or doing different things, because it's exhausting.
Or transporting to 5 different therapists or whatever, going to 2 different IEPs and whatever it is that is on the table for the day.
Well, as a side note, we are from the St. Louis area, so we prefer emos.
Oh, emos.
Yes,
I miss emos.
yes.
What do we have down here? We have Papa John's? I don't know. Like, I don't even know what the local Orlando one is. We do have a Giordano's here somewhere.
Oh, man.
We have deep dish.
Do you?
We do.
We're in St. Louis. There's no deep dish. I think St. Louis and Chicago has a little bit of a rivalry on more than sports. I think pizza's a big rivalry.
Yes,
as well.
yes. My family is all from Chicago, so they would be, the go for the deep dish people.
So let's not go to your Thanksgiving dinner, because they're probably going to fight over sports too.
Yes, because some of them are Sox fans and some of them are Cubs fans. It's pretty, that's a nasty little rivalry.
Yeah, and if you're a Cardinals fan, you got to fight all of them.
And his family's from closer to St. Louis, so they are Cardinals fans. So we've got it all.
Well, it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of great stuff for kids in care, for kids out of care, adoptive kids, and the families that support them. What are the best ways for people to be able to get a hold of you guys and reach out and get some of your resources available that you have online, or however they can contact you offline, whatever you have? What's the best way for people to touch base with you guys?
Yeah, so definitely going to the website is number one way to get a hold of us, to talk with our staff, to talk with anyone, see our resources. It's transfiguringadoption.com. We're on social media. We're mostly on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. The handle for that is at Transfigure, TRANSFIGUR, and then adopt. Weren't enough characters to put all of it in. Either that, or just if they can search on
Transfiguring
Facebook,
Adoption,
just search Transfiguring Adoption will pop up. Those are probably the best ways to get a hold of us. And then if you go to our website, definitely sign up for our e-newsletter so that you can keep in contact with everything that we're doing. And then I'll tell people too, we just came out with published a book that has ways that you can play with your kids and do playful engagement activities with them. And that has its own website called Magical Creatures without the last E.com. So Magical Creatures.
No last E, because Magical Creatures was taken.
Magical Creatures was taken, and the other
along with about every other name you could think of.
So those would be the best ways for them to get in contact. And I will say that every Monday we have a private group that people can get signed up with that just by joining our Facebook group, and we'll talk about it and watch Facebook posts. It's a support group that's a private group on Facebook. We hold it virtually. We have guests on there, so we might have therapists or other authors or different things like that.
Former foster youth, adult adoptees. We kind of have the full
We just
gamut.
connect with each other. It's a place for you to land as a caregiver. It's not medical advice. It's not legal advice. It's just some way weekly for you to connect with other people that are going through the same journey that you're going through, and just a place for you to say, hey, I'm dealing with this. Am I crazy? And just to have other people tell you, no, I'm going through the same thing. It's just a way to find other people that are just like you.
Well, if they're just like me, then they are actually crazy.
Well, I think on this journey, we all have to have a little bit of crazy in us.
Yes, ma'am.
And to survive, we need a good sense of humor too. So
Absolutely.
Well, you said Darren's mantra was 4 is enough, and we're at 7. So
yeah, we were at 7. No, we were at 6 in 2017. So, and that was supposed to be a weekend. It lasted 6 months. So 4 is enough has there's been some wobble on that here and there. So
it's more like a guideline than a rule.
yeah. Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
I mean, once they
that.
outnumber you, once you've moved from kind of like offense to defense, it's kind of, sometimes it's like, what's one more,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One more. I mean, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah. After the kids were all adopted, we had 3 others that a lot of times it was like about a week out of every month they were with us. And there was these moments where we kind of said, should we? Could we? And then we'd think, it's one thing to have them for a week, but then to add 3 more sets of therapists, 3 more sets of IEPs and everything else. We're like, maybe we're kind of at our max right now.
It's a lot.
It is.
A week oftentimes translates to a month easily.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I will say that when that happened, we knew it was happening. So it wasn't.
We were,
we were seasoned enough foster parents that we saw it coming, and we actually called on it, and we said, now when you say probably a weekend, the probably was in there. So I'm like, when you say probably a weekend.
When you said 3 weeks max, you would definitely have a home for them in 3 weeks, and like 3 months later when we're calling and saying, so, school starts next week. Do we just go ahead and enroll them? Oh, we'll find a house. We'll find a home. And like, don't just pull them out of our house just because we'll enroll them in school. They can stay here. Like, unless you have a permanent solution, don't just move them. But yeah, that we know as foster parents that there's a little wobble in that time frame. Usually, sometimes it's a big wobble.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we've experienced that wobble for sure. But it's awesome that you guys are focusing on permanency for kids as well, because that's one of the things that I think every foster system that I know of is really aiming towards, is being certain that we can find permanency for these kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think even with our adoptive kiddos, once they had permanency, that's when we really, actually, I would say when all of our kids started realizing that they were going to be in a home and they were stable. That's when we really, I won't say that it was overnight and everyone was perfect, because we're still not. But we saw some major things change in our kids for the better once they realized they had stability and they had a home. And, but like I said, we are not the perfect family by any means. So
you haven't reached perfection yet?
We haven't. I feel like it's going to be on a Tuesday sometime. So we'll call you guys and we'll come on the podcast again when that happens. He says his last interview ever.
I know the feeling. And as we talk about perfection, I can hear, I don't know if you can hear it out. If the microphone's picking up.
I picked up a second of something.
Yeah, there's a kid on the other side of the room there who's arguing with a brother over something that I'm certain is deep and abidingly important, like who has more graham crackers.
That's awesome. Do you know what? It's amazing though, because it's like the last, I think we were on another podcast that deals with foster care and adoption. And it was fun because the same thing, like it was like all of a sudden we saw the person that was hosting it go, and I'm like, okay, either you're giving me a hand signal or there's a kid doing something off like the way that I can't see that you're trying to shoo away. And then our Monday caregiver check-in, it's funny because I'll constantly like sometimes you can hear Margie in the background go, your dad's doing the check-in right now. Keep it quiet. And you're just like, yeah, we're real people, you guys. Like,
We have a real life.
Yeah, more than once I've been on a call somewhere and heard in the background, loud as can be quiet.
you're like, yes.
Yeah, I wish that worked. And we haven't yet had that. You haven't seen me have to give the finger point direction that says go.
Yeah.
The look of, are you bleeding? Are you dying?
We had Melissa Corkum on the interviewed on our podcast a while back, and she sent us something that made me really laugh when I saw it, and the guests can't see it, but it's a little door hanger that says recording, and then at the bottom she handwrites knock only for blood or fire.
Yes, she sent us one of those too.
Melissa's awesome. That's like the best door hanger ever. I'm like looking at this door hanger and I'm like, wow, this is like, how did she know?
If I could only get my 5 and 6-year-old to the point where they could read that clearly, it would be awesome.
Oh my goodness, it'd be great, man. And I'll put a plug, man. If anyone, Melissa Corkum has some awesome stuff with personality testing. Have you guys heard about that?
Yes. We interviewed her, and I am actually, I'm a fan of the Enneagram stuff. So we did talk with her.
Oh, we are too. We'll have to talk numbers later.
I gave Amanda full permission to check out during that conversation. Not her.
Yes. No, we have some other volunteers. We actually took our volunteers through that, and that we had some volunteers that opted to check out too. But no, I'm interested to see more about what Melissa has going on with that over at the Cork Board, because I think it's going to be interesting for caregivers to use that with their kids and see how they're parenting actually.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because you can begin to understand someone else's perspective a little bit as you go through that. And that's one of the things that Brian Post over at the Post Institute said was, part of our job is learning to see through a lens other than the lens that we were born with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's rough sometimes.
I think to be completely effective as foster and adoptive parents, we kind of have to be lifelong learners. We always kind of have to be figuring out a little bit more. And, it's this constant, okay, what kind of things are our children dealing with, and how can we best help them through that?
Absolutely. Well, it's been great talking to you guys today.
Absolutely.
It is amazing that, some book that my son brought home, decided to read at what was he, like second grade? I think he was. We had an early reader, has turned into something that has helped so many kids because of the way that you guys could see that these conversations really translated over into the real world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's amazing that our kids took us along for the ride. Yeah. No, I hope that we can help more people, because I think there's an easy way for people to use what they've been given in front of them and make it dynamic.
It certainly appears as if you guys are taking whatever is being handed to you, you're taking it right on down the road and running with it as far as you can and helping as many people as possible. So that's amazing. We appreciate you guys talking with us today and doing the things that you do.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate ya.